Welcome to Carting Truth Podcast, a father-daughter duo focusing on sharing revelations through conversations with the Lord. Let's get started with today's episode. Welcome to Carting Truth Podcast. I'm Lindsay here with my dad Shane, and today's episode is part 3 of our When Will Jesus Return series. No, we didn't know it was going to be a series when we first started. But there's so much more information that's came out, and we don't want you to miss a thing. So we encourage you to go back and watch episodes 1 and 2 and see how this kind of flows together. And I'm going to kind of leave it to my dad to explain where this part 3 comes in and meshes together with the others.
Yeah, Lindsay, there has been some more information coming forth. After part 1 and part 2, I thought we were done, but the Lord has other ideas. So we're going to start on part 3. And this part 3, before we get into part 3, we're going to kind of recap part 1 and part 2 so you can...
Of our mini-series?
Mini-series, yeah. So part 1, we basically talked about, in AD 32, Jesus was crucified. He resurrected.
Right.
And then he ascended.
Mm-hmm.
We went back to Hosea,
right.
chapter 5, verse 15, and we determined that that was a starting point for something.
Okay.
All right. And that starting point for that something was a 2,000-year period that Jesus would return after.
Right.
And set up his kingdom here upon the earth.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So that's kind of where we went with that. And of course, you need to see part 1, part 2 to get the details
The flow of it. Yes.
Right.
Yes.
So now to make a companion to that,
okay,
we have another situation that happened. So I fell asleep watching some videos. When I woke up, this video was on, and this guy was explaining about the 80-year problem. After 80 years, Israel has problems. All right. And so I'm going to play a clip from a prime minister, and he is talking about that 80-year problem. After he gets done talking about it, we're going to jump into it and see some more details about it.
And we do have a legacy, the Jewish people. We've got this bug that haunts us of division. We lost our first Jewish home to division between Israel and Judea. By the way, do you folks know what was the specific reason they separated? Anyone know? What was the igniter? It was taxes. Yeah. Solomon's son, Rehoboam, decided to raise taxes. Bad idea. So we lost 80% of the Jewish people. All of us are descendants only of Judea and Benjamin, right? And then we regrouped, formed another house, another home, another Jewish state. The first one survived 80 years, the first temple, 80 years. King David and Solomon, about 80 years. The second temple, or the second commonwealth of the Jewish people, survived as a sovereign and united country about 73 years during the Maccabees. And then again, internal strife tore us apart. So the Jewish people have never exceeded 80 years in Eretz Israel as a sovereign united state. We're now 73 years old. Man, this time, we're not going to let it fall apart. We're not going to let it fall apart. That's why...
Yeah, so this 80 years in trouble goes all the way back to Moses. So with Moses, he was 80 years old, and Aaron was 83, whenever they stood before Pharaoh to try to get the children of Israel released. All right, and that was back in Exodus 7:7.
Right. Okay.
Talks about that. So they go through the whole plagues and all that, and finally he releases them in that same year. And they go, and of course, what Egypt does was come after them. Right. They get stuck at the Red Sea. Of course, Paul says they were baptized in the Red Sea, and then Pharaoh drowned in that Red Sea. So they had trouble after their 80 years. All right.
Right.
So we move on down, and then later on, Moses writes in Psalms 90 that our lifespan is basically 70, which would be 70 years, and
Okay.
our strength, 80 years, right?
Oh.
After 80 years, we fly away. Just like it happened, just the same as it happened with Moses. After you had the trouble, you fly away. All right.
Okay. And we're at 80 again.
Yeah, we're at 80 again. And also in Psalms 80, if you read the Psalms number 80 and go down through, I'm not going to take the time to read that Psalms, but it talks about Egypt. It talks about some different things. And it's giving you that same feeling that we were getting with the other 80 years. All right.
Wow. Okay.
So as time goes on down, we go into Judges 5. It's verse 31. We see about Deborah.
Deborah.
She was a great judge,
We like
female.
Deborah. Female, powerful. Yes.
Yes, and she judged Israel for 40 years.
Okay.
And then after that, they sinned. And they brought up another judge. That judge was Gideon.
That's right.
And of course, Gideon, we have in Judges 7 the story of Gideon and the Midianites, and
Right.
which is basically a staged precursor to the day of the Lord, which we will get into when we do the Day of the Lord episode, which we're going to do here shortly.
Okay.
All right. So after Gideon's 40 years, so we had Deborah 40, we had Gideon 40, there's our 80.
There's our 80 again, and something happens.
Well, Gideon had a son named Abimelech, and Abimelech, after he came into power, did some dirty dealings and was causing trouble after this 80-year.
Here we go with the parallel again.
Yeah, he ends up getting killed. And a woman dropped a millstone on his head.
Oh, geez.
But he didn't die from that because he got his armor bearer to stab him before that. He didn't want to die when a woman killed him.
Wow.
So we have that 80-year cycle again, and we had trouble.
So we've got two now, right?
Yep.
Okay, 2 cycles, 2 troubles.
We've got 2 cycles and 2 troubles that actually happened. We've got another Psalm 90 verse that's telling us that after 80 years we fly away. So it's kind of prophetic about what happens after 80 years.
Right. Okay.
Not flying away. And so that brings us down to King David.
Okay.
So King David reigned for 40 years.
Of course.
And he had a son named Solomon.
Okay.
Solomon was a very wise man. And Solomon, he reigned for 40 years. And he had begat a son named Rehoboam. After Rehoboam took outward,
Oh, we got trouble.
we had trouble again.
Okay.
So we had
3.
So we had 3. We had Moses coming out, then there was trouble. We had Deborah and Gideon, then there was trouble. And then we had David and Solomon, and we had trouble. And that's what that prime minister was alluding to.
Ooh.
All right?
Wow.
So he was saying this is not going to happen again.
This next 80 years, no trouble, right?
Yes. But unfortunately, when you track the pattern, and I will put up a timeline illustration. All right? And we will see that, yes, this is going to happen again. And it ties in with what we talked about in 1 and 2.
Okay.
So 1 and 2 was talking about Christ coming back, 2,000 years from the time he left.
Right.
2032. You back up 7, you're at 2025.
Next year.
So the first part of that 70th week is not tribulation.
Okay.
Jesus says that from the abomination of desolation on is great tribulation. Now, it is a time of trouble, but it's not the tribulation. So the last 3.5 years of tribulation.
Right.
So if we're looking at this and we're saying, okay, 2025 is when this should start, based on the vision I had in part 1. If you've not seen it, go back and watch about
your visitation. Yes. Yeah.
Then the middle of this would be 2028. All right, 2025, I had 3s, 2028, halfway, half a year, still 2028. You're in the mid part. All right. Now, I do know that God's timing is not on the Roman calendar,
Right. Okay.
Gregorian calendar.
Right.
It is on the Hebrew calendar. But what I'm saying is, depending on what time in 2025, it will be sometime in 2028. All right.
Okay.
It starts. So that would mean in the midst of that, Jesus said that, well, I'll tell you what, let's just read that scripture and you'll see what Jesus said.
Okay.
All right. Let's go ahead and read that scripture.
Hey, we're going to be reading from Matthew 24, verses 15 through 21. And it says, When ye therefore shall see the abomination of desolation, spoken of by Daniel the prophet, stand in the holy place, whoso readeth, let him understand. Then let them which be in Judea flee into the mountains. Let him which is on the housetop not come down to take anything out of the house. Neither let him which is in the field return back to take his clothes. And woe unto them that are with child, and to them that give suck in those days. But pray ye that your flight not be in the winter, neither on the Sabbath day. For then shall be great tribulation, such as was not since the beginning of the world to this time. No, nor ever shall be.
Yeah. So if you say that the abomination of desolation starts in 2028, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where's our 80-year factor coming in, right?
That's kind of what I was thinking.
All right. So let's go back and read a passage in Isaiah, and then I'll explain where our 80-year factor is.
All right.
Okay.
And we're going to be reading from Isaiah 66, 7 through 9. And it says, Before she travailed, she brought forth. Before her pain came, she was delivered of a man child. Who hath heard such a thing? Who hath seen such things? Shall the earth be made to bring forth in one day? Or shall a nation be born at once? For as soon as Zion travailed, she brought forth her children. Shall I bring to the birth and not cause to bring forth, saith the Lord? Shall I cause to bring forth and shut the womb, saith thy God?
Now, Lindsay, this passage in Isaiah 66, 7 through 9, is the key to all prophetic understanding.
Ooh, do
It,
tell.
well, think about it. In AD 70, the Romans came and destroyed Jerusalem and scattered the Jews to the uttermost parts of the earth, the four winds, as God says.
Okay.
And they had been scattered and dispersed amongst all the other nations. All right.
Okay.
Well, there's no nation that's ever been treated that way or done that way has ever recovered from it. So now we have Israel back in the land. God said he would bring them back. He gathered them back. He put them back in their land. The name of Israel is being named. It's a state in the Middle East.
Right.
Even though the Arab people will not recognize it, but it is there.
Right.
And God said, well, I cause a nation to be born in a day. And it was.
Oh, okay. Well,
May 15th, 1948.
okay.
The UN recognized Israel as a state.
Right.
It was born. All right.
Mm-hmm.
So if you start in 1948 when they're born and you add 80 years to that, where does it take you to?
Oh, gosh.
2028. And what Jesus says at the midpoint of that tribulation is that there's going to be this flight that takes place. That's what we read in Matthew. And he's telling them how to take their flight. He said, don't go back. He said, pray that it's not in the winter. Pray that it's not on the Sabbath day when you take this flight. What happened with Moses? He went 80 years, went to Pharaoh, they took flight. All right. Then what happened to Deborah and Gideon?
Mm-hmm.
Then there was a scattering trouble.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then David and Solomon, there was a division, scattering, trouble. And then now, 2028, that Antichrist saying that he's God in the temple of God, Jesus says, hey, when you see that happen, take flight, scatter, time of trouble, get gone. Fits the same patterns that we've been seeing through Israel's history.
Wow.
And it falls right into the same timeline that we were talking about in part one, part two. Falls right into what we were talking about, part one, part two.
Don't people also call it the time of Jacob's trouble?
It is the time of Jacob's trouble. The whole thing is the time of Jacob's trouble, but the tribulation part, because in the passage that we read, Hosea 5:15, he said, early in your affliction or your tribulation, that's when they will recognize him, that we talked about. If you haven't seen the episode on the Pool of Siloam, we talked about this too.
That is, yes, that
And
is
so
very
it's all these things are coming into the same space. So we've got Jesus coming back in 2,000 years, and then 80 years from Israel's birth, they will scatter. Is both meshing into the same timeline.
chills.
And I'll put that timelines up. I'll put them up and show you, and you can kind of look that it's, you'll see on that timeline Deborah, you'll see Gideon, you'll see David, you'll see Solomon, you'll see the timeline, the first 1,260 days, the second 1,260 days. I'll put that up there where you can see it. And you can see how these two timelines will mesh together.
Wow.
And I was not even aware of this 80-year thing.
There's so many.
Well, this pattern, you got to have two witnesses, and we got two witnesses that take us to 2,000 years after Christ leaves, that will be coming back. And now we've got a witness to the same time period as this 80-year then trouble pattern that shows up that the Israelites are well aware of. Well, that prime minister would not be speaking about it. And it's basically their history.
Also, just to clarify, you're talking 2028 is about that time where the tribulation actually starts.
Starts with the abomination of desolation.
Right. So we're not saying the tribulation starts in 2025. We're just saying the timeline that we're on.
Yeah, the
The
70th week should start in 2025 with the two-state solutions. And then they'll build their temple in that first 3.5 years.
And that's when it's on.
And we will do a podcast on how long it will take for them to do that, to build that temple, because there's a verse that tells us how long.
Oh my goodness. Of course there is.
There's a verse that tells us how long it will take them to build the temple. So we'll get into that. But what's so amazing to me is what we just talked about in part one and two. This part three meshes right in.
Right.
And I'll show you that. I'll flash that chart up in the video so you can see it.
I know, if you're a visual person like me, the charts really, really help, and it's amazing to see how everything flows together.
And I'll keep it simple so it doesn't get real muddy, but basically what's going to happen, you can go back to our two witness video also. The first 1,260 days of two witness preach. And then the last 1,260 days is the tribulation. But what we're emphasizing today is that 80-year then trouble issue pattern is lining up perfectly with what we talked about in part one, part two.
Wow. So we had to do a part three because
we've got.
But it's worth mentioning because anything that parallels like that is incredible evidence of the timing.
Christ is coming back, and we've got to be ready. We've got to be ready. There's going to be a huge revival in that first part.
Right.
When those two witnesses are preaching, everyone is going to get saved.
First 3.5 years, which starts in 2025.
1,260 days, which starts in 2025.
Okay.
Everybody's going to get saved is going to get saved to them. And then after that, the Antichrist will have total dominating 42 months.
The delusion will take the delusion stuff and all the.
We'll talk about that delusion too. We'll add a few things in. We'll put a bunch of parts in there together and show you what that strong delusion is too. So
Revelation is so much information.
Yeah, we'll be on the cutting edge with that one too.
Yes, I know. I felt somebody commented on one of our videos that we're now in the crazy club. Right. But I mean, proud member of the crazy club because this stuff is so real and there's so much mysterious stuff in the Bible and the patterns are incredible that only God can do. So if that makes us crazy, then let it Let us be.
Well, I feel responsibility to tell you. You can think I'm crazy, not believe. That's fine. You know, I'm not going to try.
Well, a lot of people said Jesus was crazy too. And the supernatural is nothing new to
It's
him.
not our job to make people believe. It's our job to encourage them to believe.
Obedient.
But we can't make them. Only Jesus can save people. So what we're doing is trying to let you know, tell if your friends and your family or somebody you know does not know Jesus, it's time for you to start really opening your heart to them about this, because once that midpoint comes, the door will shut. It'll be
Yeah.
over with, and we will be getting into some other uh, videos that will show how that process takes place, and it's not the way most people think.
All right. Well, I can't wait for that one too.
All right.
More to come. If you are enjoying the content and would like to support our ministry, you can do so through Venmo or PayPal. Our handle is @CardingTruth, or use our QR code. We want to thank you for tuning in today, and we also want to remind you, if you're enjoying our content, we would love for you to like and subscribe, click that bell, and also the commenting. We really enjoyed the comments and reading the comments, and we are always open to know what the Lord is placing on your heart. So please, any questions, comments, anything like that, we encourage you to leave those, and we enjoy getting back to you.